Welcome to Influenced, a book lovers podcast, hosted by book besties Tegan and Amanda.
Here at Influenced, we cover books we've been influenced to read thanks to the internet, as well as books that have influenced us.
This podcast will talk about books ranging in age demographics, including adult content. Plus, we've been known to swear a time or two, so keep that in mind in case you have others around you. With that said, we are happy you're here.
We were influenced to read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which was released in 2023 by Atria Books. The audiobook is 10 hours and 20 minutes at normal speed. And it was just announced at the beginning of June that Netflix will develop a movie adaptation of None of This Is True. Obviously, that's a brand new announcement, so we don't have any info about casting or estimated release date yet, but I am excited to watch that when it comes out.
I am too. This was one book that, as I was reading it, thought I would love to see a movie adaptation to this.
It gave me a lot of Gone Girl vibes and that really unreliable female main character that I think would do really well on screen.
Plus, that's a kind of trope that has been used more a lot lately, and this one was really well done with that trope, so seeing it on screen will be really cool. Lisa Jewell's initial idea was to write a stalker novel because she had actually never written about a stalker before. Although this isn't quite exactly a stalker novel, that was the initial premise going into it. And Lisa actually has her own birthday twin, fellow author Louise Candish. So that's kind of the inspiration as to where this book has come from. Now, if you haven't read None of This Is True yet, don't worry. We're going to start with a spoiler free overview, and then we will give you a fair warning when we move into the area with too much detail.
So, None of This Is True is a psychological thriller. It follows the story of Alex and Josie, who are birthday twins. They were actually born in the same hospital and met for the very first time on their 45th birthdays when they decided to celebrate at the same restaurant. After meeting, Josie approached Alex, who is a popular podcaster regarding successful women, about covering her life story. Josie was married to a man more than 25 years her senior, loved denim, and had a very reclusive life. The polar opposite of Alex, who has a successful career, young children, and a large group of friends. Alex agreed to cover Josie's story, not knowing where it would lead. But as time went on, between an ominous story told by Josie, questionable husbands, and hidden secrets, the dynamic between Josie and Alex becomes interweaved in more ways than they anticipate. The book is told from third-person point of view, following Alex, her husband Nathan, and then Josie and her husband Walter.
With that synopsis done, it is time for us to give our star ratings of None of This Is True. How do we rate our reads? It's great that you asked. Tegan and I both have a very similar star rating format. If it's 5 stars, it's a perfect book. 4, nearly perfect. 3 stars is a good book. 2 stars is a bad book. And 1 star you'll likely never hear on here because we DNF'd it. For me, None of This Is True was a 4-star out of 5 stars for me. I think it was completely worth the hype. It was one of the better thrillers that I've read in a while, and I am very, very picky about my thrillers. I tend to be the type of person who looks at plot holes or things that are going to cause a problem, and this is one that I didn't have too much of that. I have one major criticism that we'll talk about later, but overall, what a great book.
I'm definitely more of a vibes reader when it comes to thrillers. I'm very picky about my fantasy novels and their world building, but with thrillers, it's mostly vibes. It's was this predictable or did it keep me guessing? And None of This Was True kept me on my toes the entire time. I thought Lisa Jewell did a really great job of building anticipation throughout the novel, and it was hands down 5 out of 5 for me. If you also liked None of This Is True or are looking for A similar reading recommendation, we recommend Verity by Colleen Hoover, Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, or The Only One Left by Riley Sager.
All of those books Tegan and I have actually read and would agree that there is probably a common theme in all of them if you liked this book. So keep on reading. Now, this is the part of the journey together where Tegan and I are going to do a deep dive and discussion into None of This Is True. So, this is your spoiler warning. If you have not read the book, now is your time to stop listening if you don't want the ending spoiled. However, if you don't mind spoilers or don't plan to read the book, by all means, join us further.
And we always start off this section describing the main characters in 3 words. For today, we will describe Alex and Josie. My 3 words for Alex were curious, judgmental, and naive.
Naive was a word I almost put on mine, but I think I've used that word for several other characters and felt like I was getting really repetitive saying the word naive. So I use the words for Alex ambitious, blind, and sympathetic.
Oh, those are really good words.
Thank you.
That that does depict her very well.
I almost use empathetic, but I was like, I don't think she's really empathetic. I think she's more sympathetic and a kind of a people pleaser, a I don't want to say no to you even though I want to say no to you type of person.
While also silently judging.
Yes, absolutely silently judging. So, what did you put for Josie?
For Josie, I put manipulative, unstable, and obsessive.
Those are accurate. I also put manipulative as my first word. I mean, I think that's the first word that easily comes to mind when you think of Josie in this book. I also put envious and uncontent. I don't know if uncontent's a word, but spell check did not tell me it wasn't a word, so I put it.
I think it's discontent,
Oh,
but we can go with uncontent. That works.
discontent makes so much more sense. I'm literally going to change that in my notes right now. I could not. That's the word I was like, I can't remember the rules between using un and dis and those kind of things. I was just like, uncontent. Spell check says it's good to go, so I'm gonna call it good.
Well, if spell check says it's right, then it's right, right?
Well, spell check's also not telling me discontent's wrong, and I trust you who has a better vocabulary than I do.
Hey, I also led us into saying second person POV instead of third person POV for the first 5 episodes of this podcast. So
I
don't trust me too blindly.
I think you're fine. It's fine. It's fine. We're still young. We're growing. We get to make mistakes for that reason. We can only go up from here.
Right. Yes, we're human. We make mistakes. Everything's fine. We're doing great.
That's our life motto now. We're just going to have shirts that say, everything is great with flames behind it.
Can I have dragons on it too?
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
We'll just put all the
I'm
things
down.
that we love. That makes me think of the fact that I want a bookworm tattoo, but it's a dragon worm type of like WYRM with a book
Oh,
in
I
it.
like
I
that.
don't know
That's
how I want to
clever.
design
Yeah.
it, how I want it to look, but if I want it to be like cute and cozy, like a little dragon worm type of thing holding a book, or if I want it to be like fierce or magical looking, I don't know. But I'm itching for another tattoo so bad right now.
Oh my gosh, same. I have a whole Pinterest board of like 30 tattoos that I want to get.
Plus, my Facebook and Instagram reels, they are just a mixture of house decoration and remodeling. For some reason, wedding dresses, even though I have been married for a long period of time now, and tattoos, particularly
Oh, that's
fine
so
line
funny.
tattoos.
I'm a big fan of fine line tattoos. My social media is all books and Boston Terriers.
That
So there's
matches. That adds up
Do-
very easily.
doesn't it though?
But we
Yes.
digress, as we
Yes,
usually
we've
do.
gotten very off track.
We're really good at
Uh-huh.
that.
So so tell me, what did you think of the structure of the book being set up around a podcast and a Netflix documentary?
I felt like it was very different, but very modern. So I really liked it. As a fantasy reader, primarily, it was fun to read a book that was in a modern setting, but felt relatable through this podcast and Netflix structure because those are very digestible formats that people like to take things in nowadays. I mean, we all
Mhm.
love a good true crime podcast or documentary. Now, I do think it would have been cool, and I'm not saying it would have made the book better, but I do think it would have been neat to see the story done in a real time scenario, almost like the first season of oh, what's that show called? Only Murders in the Building,
Okay, yeah.
where they are doing this podcast as they are investigating. I do think I would have liked to see Alex releasing these episodes while interviewing Josie and seeing the hype get built up around it, and maybe the
Mhm.
interaction of fans saying, "Hey, Josie might be a little crazy," but that probably would have given away the thriller aspect of it. So I'm not saying that that would have made it better, but I do think that that could have been another spin that Lisa could have taken with the book.
And actually, another book that does that that we should have mentioned in our similar reading racks is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder.
I haven't read that book.
I really enjoyed it. It is YA, so I'm not sure if it would be up your alley. But one thing I really liked about that book was the mixed media. And the main character is investigating and releasing her podcast episodes in real time. So I thought that was a cool way to do that. I also really liked the mixed media style in this book. And in a way, I sort of liked that the documentary was telling the story of the past because that really helped to build anticipation throughout the entire book. With some of the documentary material, you get these little snippets of info along the way that just totally hook you in. Like I knew something tragic had happened and I had to keep reading to find out the details.
Immediately, what comes to mind is that Caitlin character when they
Yes.
had brought her in the Netflix interview, and she talked about how she took a job from Josie and wish she hadn't, but we hadn't even gotten to that point yet in the book. And so it helped kind of set that stage and wonder what in the world is going to happen.
And something else early on that happened was Alex was reflecting on her relationship with Josie and made a comment about that being before the murders took place. You're like, wait a minute. Somebody was murdered? Who was murdered? Who did the murdering?
What is going on?
Right.
The writing of this book was so engaging. I don't know about you, but I read this book in one sitting. I started it on a Sunday morning and finished it at 2 a.m. on Monday because I could not stop.
Wow.
And one of the reasons why is the way that these characters are written and the perspectives that they're written in. Now, Josie's character is written in a very ambiguous way, so we don't know what's true and what's not. What was your thoughts about the writing and the author's choice to write Josie in this way?
Whew. I was on a roller coaster with Josie the entire time. Like, initially, I felt sorry for her because she came across as this lonely and sheltered character. But then I quickly started to suspect she might be a terrible person. And then it ended with a glimpse of what was going on in her mind and her perception of things. I almost felt sorry for her again. The style of writing, where she's just written in this ambiguous way, keeps you guessing about her character. Is she a victim or is she a villain? And it was this back and forth, up and down roller coaster the entire time.
I kept going back and forth. Well, what if she's not lying? Maybe she's just a very envious person, but not a violent person. And made you kind of go back and forth wondering, well, how much of this is due to the fact that she was a victim and was groomed and grew up with a pedophile as a husband, but also holy crap, she's stealing things from this Alex character. She's not playing a very supportive role as a mother. What is going on here? So, when did you start to suspect that Josie was not as innocent as she let on? Because for me personally, I had this like red flag moment at the very beginning when she would not leave Alex alone. I had this secondhand embarrassment moment after Josie meets Alex in the bathroom when she wanted to go back up to her and found her again and thought, I need her to tell my story, and was a little relentless about it. That already was the red flag for me. Like, why would you do that? That just seems so creepy and crossing a boundary that I don't think most people in the real world would do. But the thing that sealed it for me was the ring footage of her looking in the house and taking, what was it, a magazine out of the recycling or something like that?
Yes. So I started to suspect pretty early on as well, not quite as early as you. That's actually typical for us. But when I really started to suspect that she wasn't quite as innocent was when she took her dog for a walk and intentionally went by Josie's house. And then, same as you, it really solidified it for me when she was caught on the Ring camera and was going through the recycling, took the magazine out of the trash, and then was peeking through the windows, even though she knew nobody was home.
That also just makes me think, this woman, do you not realize modern technology exists and that most people nowadays have some sort of cameras and can keep tabs on their home when they're not there?
Right. And for as suspicious as Josie is, I would think that she would be utilizing those in her own home and be quite familiar with them. So it was interesting that she didn't think about that being a possibility.
Now, I'll also say that moment of Josie stealing out of her recycling and them catching her on the ring footage was the moment that I think Alex probably should have stopped the interview process and said, Hey, I'm done. But she didn't.
I completely agree. And if not then maybe when Josie started butting herself into the relationship between Alex and Nathan and criticizing Nathan's behavior. And if not then when Josie showed up in the middle of the night and weaseled her way into staying with them for a week. But Alex had her own motivations for why she didn't want to stop, right? She knew that she was onto something and that this was going to be a successful podcast. There was a point in time where we got a little glimpse into Alex's thoughts on that, and she started to recognize that Josie might be unstable and that it might be a bad situation, but she was like, "Oh, I have to keep going with the podcast though. This is going to be successful. This is going to earn me money. This might be my big break." So she chose to keep taking that risk.
I kept thinking, don't you have like an editor or a producer or someone that you should be pitching this to? Or maybe she was hoping that she would get all these episodes compiled and stuff and then edit and send off to a producer to say, hey, the Successful Women podcast has lived its life and here's where I want to go. Maybe that's the angle she was taking. But I kept thinking, ooh, pump the brakes, honey.
Yeah, it got really twisted and out of control really fast.
And this book only takes place over what, like a handful of weeks?
Right.
To go from meeting your birthday twin in a restaurant to your life completely turned upside down in a manner of just a few weeks. Whoo, boy. What a crazy wild ride.
So, one of the reasons that Josie reached out to Alex in the first place was because she thought Alex was the answer to everything somehow. Why do you think she had that idea?
Oh, here's my thought process on that. So at first, I go into this thinking that she thinks Alex is this answer to everything because it's going to tell her life story about a shitty husband and kids that don't love her. But I actually think that Josie was so manipulative and spins details so intricately that I think that Josie wondered if she got her story out there in a way that she remembered it and twisted those details, that she would actually end up free of Walter and the kids, to be able to get her truth out there first, get them implicated, get them either arrested or sent away or something, that she would then live that free life that she had so desired throughout the book.
Okay, interesting. I did not go there, but I totally see where you're coming from. And I think is a very definite possibility. For me, I was really attached to this birthday twin idea. When Josie's mom found out that she and Alex were doing the podcast, they spun this story to her about it being this idea about birthday twins and how both of the women were born on the same day in the same hospital, but they just had these different environmental factors. These grew up with different families. And could that have impacted the way that they turned out? And if Josie had grown up with Alex's family, would she have been a different person? And so that's where my head went, was just tying myself to that idea and thinking that Josie viewed Alex as this person who really had her stuff together, and Josie could have been her in another life. And that's why she was so attached and thought Alex was going to have all the answers for her.
At the end of the book, we have more perspectives on Josie as a character and the truth of what she did, from her children, from Roxy and Aaron, from Caitlin, and from all the other people she affected in her life. With all of these different point of views and the truth coming out from them, did it change how you saw Josie?
It did bring me back to sort of feeling sorry for Josie, because ultimately she is a villain. She is a terrible person. She is very manipulative. But also, I think that Josie just has a really warped sense of reality. And I think in the reality that she lives in, the reality in her head, she thinks that she is a good person. You know, she kidnapped Nathan to try to give Alex freedom. She either killed Brooke or covered up the killing of Brooke to protect Roxy. And she justifies these things in her mind, feeling like she is a good person doing the right thing, protecting her family, protecting her friends. But yeah, she just has a really warped sense of reality, and she's not a good person.
I feel like these moments also shined a light on just how manipulative, but expertly so, that she was. It's one thing to be manipulative, but she was able to take the truths and twist the details so that they were in her favor, but they were still half truth. It's like the saying that all lies are built on truth, because they're easier to give that way. It's almost like what she did here. For example, the way she would talk about Aaron or Roxy and their backgrounds and their behaviors, Roxy's behavior in school, and that she was in and out, because that could be corroborated by other people that Roxy went to school with, and use those things to shine a light in Josie's favor.
And I guess one question that I still had at the end of this, that I think was an intentional question the author left in our minds, is was Josie intentionally manipulative, or was she manipulative because she actually believed those lies and believed that warped sense of reality to be true?
I think she's just being absolutely manipulative. I mean, who
I knew you would say
who
that.
kidnaps a person for the betterment of others without, like, deluding themselves? And no, no,
Well,
that's a
yeah,
line I can't cross.
of course she's deluding herself. She has this false sense of reality. But I think maybe that goes a little bit more on the lines of like mental illness and like, somebody who is like a pathological liar or something like that, where they're saying all of these lies, they're saying all of this manipulative stuff, but in their own minds, they believe it 100% to be true.
That's fair. You can't change what happened, woman. Like, surely at
Yeah.
some point you're cognizant enough to know that you're lying about these things. But again, she may need so much more help than life can offer her. And yeah, maybe she really is deluding herself.
Right. And at the end of the day, like, the intentions don't matter here.
I also wonder, did she kill Brooke or did Roxy kill Brooke? I need to know what you think about this.
Oh. Okay, I went back and forth on this, and I still don't have a definite answer. My gut says that Roxy may have accidentally killed Brooke, but it's hard to say that for sure. Josie's monologue at the end said she was protecting Roxy, but when she had her fight with Walter earlier in the book, she said she was going to tell Alex everything that happened with the girls. And I think by that, she either meant what happened between Brooke and Roxy or Walter abusing the girls. But then on the other hand, Josie kept Brooke's phone case, similarly to how she kept Alex's things. But she kept Alex's things without killing Alex. So I really don't know. I really don't know.
I'm also torn about this. I went back and forth. I am leaning more toward Josie killing her, but I don't say that with 100% confidence. The one area that I am a little reluctant to say that Josie killed Brooke was because Josie didn't really love her kids like she thought she loved her kids. So when Roxy had
Mhm.
left, I don't know what motivation there would have been there for her to kill Brooke because Roxy was
Right.
already gone. I don't think she was actually distraught that her daughter left and that she actually blamed Brooke on it. But I also don't know if she loved Roxy enough to cover up it if Roxy had actually killed Brooke. I also go to those trophies that you mentioned. Why would Josie keep these trophies of Brooke's if she hadn't done it? I had initially thought about that comment you mentioned to Walter, where Josie told him, I'm going to tell Alex everything. But then while I was rereading a few parts for this episode, I came across that Aaron had listened to Josie kill Brooke and had actually brought it up to Walter about a year prior. So he was already aware of it. So he was still
Oh,
complicit.
yeah.
He knew it had happened, but I think he was protecting Aaron in that situation because Aaron also didn't say anything about it and ended up just reclusing herself into her room.
So what happened with the girls could have been Brooke being murdered and Aaron witnessing
Exactly. I
it.
think he was protecting Aaron.
Got it.
And that the other thing with the comment with the girls, her assumption that he was sexually abusing Aaron, when in reality he was going to play games with her through her game streaming, that was the other reference. But again, she spins these details so expertly so that I still question it.
Right. You just don't know what's
It's like
true.
our discussion with Verity all over again. You're just like, but
Oh my
this, and
gosh.
this, and this. Ultimately, though, all of this discussion and is it this or is it that is kind of a given in the title. None of this is true. Is this title just about Josie? Is it about everyone? Is the truth in all of the lies, or what are we supposed to do as readers to find them?
I'm leaning toward it applying to everyone. I think everybody tells part truths, part lies. Everybody has their secrets. I think there are parts of each character's point of view in this book that are untrue.
I also lean the same way. I do think it's mostly about Josie and her story for the podcast, but I
Mhm.
think the concept of everybody lies and that none of this is true does apply to everybody. I think that there's a case to be made that the sisters might be spinning a little bit of it to protect their dad. There was that line to Walter about what we did. Now, I've said that I don't necessarily think it's the way it was spun, but there is still a case that Josie's reality could have some level of truth to it. Maybe Roxy had a role in Brooke's death. but I still think Josie was in on it 1,000%. But maybe Roxy was involved in some capacity and Walter was protecting them even more so than we realize.
Which is really a clever premise for a book.
I mean, isn't that human nature? Everybody lies in some capacity, whether that's little white lies to help spare feelings or to save ourselves from trouble or our own guilt or grief. We all do it intentionally or unintentionally. But you rated this a 5-star book, so I'm going to hold my thoughts here for a second.
Okay.
Is there anything, despite you thinking this book is 5 stars, that you wish the author had done differently?
I do think it would have been really cool to have maybe a chapter or two from either Walter and or Nathan's point of view, especially during that period of time when Nathan was at the bar with Caitlin and then leaving the hotel and getting into the car with Josie, thinking that it was going to be Alex picking him up. Like having his perspective during those moments could have been really interesting.
Yeah, we get a little snippet of it at the very, very beginning of the book. That prologue is him leaving the hotel lobby and getting into Josie's car. But that's
Right.
all we get. And it would have been really neat to see a full circle moment with toward the end of the book filling in that gap.
So that's exactly what I was thinking.
I have 2 things that brought this book down for me. So the first criticism I have is kind of small, and it wouldn't have deducted much, if anything, off of my star rating initially. But that is that Alex only had 8,000 followers on social media, but she has this big, well known podcast with awards. It mentioned that it was an award winning podcast, but she only had 8,000 followers. No, no, come on. She had way more than that.
I totally missed those details. That's so funny. Like how with how much scrutiny you read all of these details, and I super appreciate that about you.
I don't know why I pick apart things like that, but I do.
You are the fact finder.
I try my best.
What's the other one?
Here's my big thing, and that is Walter. I had to deduct a star because I do not, with a capital do not, underline, bold, italicized, all of the things. Do not like the way that it felt like Walter was given this free pass for being a pedophile. The last third of the book talks about Aaron gaming with him, how much the girls love their father, and I don't mean that that couldn't be true, but it felt like it kind of swept under the rug that Walter was ultimately a pedophile, and it was so messed up in the way that him and Josie got together. So, here's how I fix it in my mind to make this better.
Okay.
Josie was so manipulative. We've talked about that through all these questions. And we learned from her mom that she was very manipulative at a very young age. I
Mhm.
would have liked to have seen her more blatantly manipulate Walter so it was a little more black and white. Whether
Yeah.
that's blackmailing him into marriage, saying, I need you to marry me and we are going to be together, or whatever it may be. I feel like some sort of harsher line and more deliberate manipulation from Josie would have made that situation a little less icky.
I totally get where you're coming from there. And I am not a fan of age gaps in books, let alone pedophilia. I mean, he was murdered though, so did he really get a free pass?
But he was like already old.
Yeah. I totally agree with you that it would have been nice to see a little bit more manipulation on Josie's side of Walter. But I think that we got little indications throughout that that had occurred and that was happening because, as you mentioned, like Josie's mom said that she was manipulative from a young age and mentions that she always wanted to be in control of things. And Walter had similar conversations with Alex where he said that, Josie always needed to be in control and that depictions of the truth weren't accurate. So I think there are the implications that that happens. Like Walter was in a happy relationship with Josie's mom, and then Josie like swept in and was just like, "No, I want you. You're going to be mine."
I just felt like it wasn't clear enough. Like, he left her
Yeah.
mom to be with her? Ugh. Let's not, like, make him out to be this great guy at the end of the book just because Josie's also a shitty person. Like, no, he was a shitty person too. That's why I can't 100% say that Josie killed her, because that storyline with Brooke, if he was a pedophile to Josie, he very well could have been to Brooke.
Yeah. And then maybe Josie killed Brooke because Brooke slept with her husband.
Maybe.
I wouldn't deduct a star for that, but I do agree that it would have been nice to have a little bit more, I don't know, closure or consequence.
Going with closure, this isn't one we plan to talk about, but how did you feel about Josie still being out in the wild and not caught by police at the end of this?
That's terrifying. I feel like this ending was just set up for her to be able to, like, find another man and do this all over again. Like, just continue falling in love with men and then murdering them when they fall short of her expectations.
Yeah. Plus, she had that line in there, "You can't be a feminist unless you're free." And I could see her
Yeah.
being on
Oh
this, like,
gosh.
crazy feminist agenda of, this is what it means to be a feminist and to kill all the men that are terrible.
Yes, and also she had left behind all of the trophies she took from Alex except for that necklace. And in that ending scene, she was playing with the necklace that she took from Alex, which makes me think she's not done with Alex.
I hadn't even thought about that. And now that Alex has, quote unquote, turned against her and has this series out and tells that story, what if she comes for Alex?
That's where my headcanon is.
I think this means we need a second book, Lisa. Please and thank you.
Unfortunately, when I was looking into this, Lisa said, absolutely not. She's done with these characters. She's done with this story. But maybe Netflix will add something at the end.
Yeah, maybe we'll get some closure there. That does feel like the big thing with thrillers nowadays, is to leave this sort of ending open so you can make your own conclusions and fill in the gaps for yourself.
Which part of me is like, "No, I wanna know exactly how it ends," and the other part of me is happy to have a little bit left to the imagination and be able to come up with my own conclusions about where things might have gone. I think one of the big pieces of media that really started that trend was the Before Sunrise series. Is that what it's called?
I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, so these were movies that came out in the mid 1990s and early 2000s. It was, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and I think the last one is called After Midnight.
Oh, maybe I
Um,
have seen those.
it's like a Yeah, they're like a romance drama, and spoiler warning if anybody hasn't seen it. So After Sunrise ends with them like depart on a train station and they agree to meet each other like a year from then or something like that. And then it just cuts off. So you're left wondering, did they meet up and continue their romance after that point like they said they would, or did they just have this summer fling and then go about their ways? Anyway, huge digression, but I feel like that was one of the first, like, really strong media introductions to that concept of sort of that cliffhanger ending where you got to decide for yourself as a reader, as a viewer, how things turned out.
Well, that is all we have for our discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us. We would love to hear your thoughts on None of This Is True. If you would like to connect with us, please consider following us on TikTok and Instagram. We are the handle at Influenced Book Podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate us wherever you get your podcasts.
We look forward to our next episode when we will be discussing Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Until next time, happy reading!